There is a bottle of bourbon sitting on shelves across this country right now, priced at $300, that finished behind a $75 bottle from the same distillery in blind tasting after blind tasting, not occasionally, consistently. And the people selling the $300 bottle know this. They are counting on you not knowing it. That is not an accident. That is a business model. 9 famous bottles. 9 cases where the story in the marketing costs more than the liquid in the glass. And for every one of them, there is a better answer at a fraction of the price. By the end of this, you will never look at a bourbon shelf the same way again. The last entry on this list is the one I feel most strongly about, and the gap between what you are paying and what you are getting is genuinely infuriating. Let us start with a bottle that lives on the middle shelf of almost every liquor store in America, surrounded by enough mythology to fill a distillery tour brochure. Old Forester, 1924. 10 years old, 100 proof, and priced at $115 manufacturer's suggested retail price, closer to $120 on the most recent release. The name implies something historically significant, a specific moment, a specific era, a reason you are paying this much. Here is what the name actually is. It is a year on a label. It is atmosphere. It is marketing shorthand for premium. Without having to explain why this particular bottle deserves $115 when Brown-Forman, the same company, puts out multiple expressions at 1/3 of the cost. The liquid itself is not bad. That is almost the problem. It is genuinely enjoyable, smooth without being thin, with a decent oak presence and some dried fruit underneath. But at $115, you are expecting a 10-year-old bourbon that justifies the gap between this and a $40 shelf neighbor. It does not. The oak does not have the depth you want at this age and this price point. The finish is competent, but brief. It is like paying for a custom suit and getting a very well pressed off the rack jacket. It looks right from a distance. It does not hold up when you actually check the seams. Brown-Forman makes the answer to this problem themselves. Cooper Craft Barrel Reserve, around $35 to $40 on most shelves, draws from both the Old Forester mash bill and the early Times mash bill, is 100 proof, and delivers a richness that honestly embarrasses its older sibling at nearly 3 times the price. Buy this instead and put $80 back in your pocket. Now we need to talk about a bottle that has become less a whiskey and more a cultural artifact, and that distinction is costing bourbon drinkers real money. Blanton's Single Barrel, 93 proof, around $80 at the manufacturer's suggested retail price when you can find it at that price, which is increasingly rare. The bottle is distinctive, a round decanter design with a collectible horse and jockey stopper, 8 different versions that spell out BLANTONS, and a mythology around it that Buffalo Trace has cultivated masterfully. It was the first commercially marketed single-barrel bourbon. The history is real. The problem is that the history is doing all the heavy lifting now. At 93 proof, this is not a high-intensity pour. It is a single-barrel product, which means there is genuine barrel-to-barrel variation, and that variation cuts both ways. Some barrels are exceptional, some are merely fine. But the price does not change based on which barrel you got. You are paying a premium for a stopper and a story, and the quality of what is inside is inconsistent in a way that a $100 price at many retailers does not acknowledge. The liquid, when you get a good barrel, opens with caramel and a light floral note, some orange peel, and reasonable spice. It is pleasant. It is genuinely good. It is not $70, $80, $90, or $100 worth of good. There are single-barrel bourbons sitting next to it on the shelf, with no name recognition and no collectible hardware, that beat it in the glass at half the price. The brand is the product here, not the bourbon. Now here's where we start talking about the same family charging you twice. Booker's. Uncut, unfiltered, bottled at full barrel proof, somewhere between 121 and 130 proof, 6 to 8 years old, and landing at around $100 manufacturer's suggested retail price. Every year, 4 batches. The names change, the proof floats around, and the implication is that you are getting something rare, crafted, and special from a legendary distiller. Here's what you are actually getting. You're getting Jim Beam whiskey. Good Jim Beam whiskey, to be fair. Big, loud, barrel-forward, legitimately intense and interesting. But the company that makes Booker's also makes Knob Creek. And Knob Creek 12-year is 100 proof, 12 years old, and costs somewhere between $60 and $65 on most shelves. It is the kind of whiskey that makes you set the glass down and look at it for a second before the next sip. Think about that like a restaurant with 2 chefs working out of the same kitchen. One sends out the dish at $40. The other sends out a very similar dish with a different plate and a different story, and charges $100 for it. Same kitchen, same techniques, same family of ingredients. The Knob Creek 12-year has age and complexity on its side. The Booker's has proof and mythology. And if you genuinely want the high-proof experience without the Booker's price, find a store-pick Knob Creek cask strength single barrel. Many retailers carry them. They regularly come in above 120 proof, and they sit around $60 to $70. Same production family, $40 less. Do the math yourself. Plant this in the back of your mind because we are coming back to this same production family later, and the gap gets even wider. Maker's Mark Cask Strength. At its proper suggested retail price of around $50, this is one of the genuinely great value releases in American whiskey. It has a wheated mash bill, and it is bottled between 107 and 114 proof, depending on the batch. As of early 2026, it now carries an age statement of 7 to 8 years. At $50, this is an excellent bottle. The problem is not the whiskey. The problem is what happens to the price between the distillery and your hand. The Cellar Age series, annual releases bottled at cask strength and positioned as the prestige tier of the Maker's Mark lineup, regularly lands on shelves at $175 to $200 or more. Some retailers push closer to $250. The liquid is genuinely good. It is the same wheated mash bill that makes standard Maker's Mark so approachable, concentrated, and more complex at higher proof. But the jump from the $50 standard cask strength to the $200 Cellar Age is not a 4 times improvement in quality. It is a marketing narrative about exclusivity dressed up as a tasting experience. In blind tastings conducted by enthusiast groups and independent reviewers, the Cellar Age releases have repeatedly failed to justify their secondary price against competitors at a quarter of the cost. You are paying for the annual release story, the limited supply theater, the label progression, not 4 times more whiskey quality. The marketing department is the most expensive ingredient in this bottle. Before we get to the final 2 overpriced entries, and trust me, those are the ones that are going to make you genuinely angry. Take a second and subscribe if you have not already. Every week this channel does exactly what we just did. Pulls back the curtain on what you are actually paying for versus what is actually in the glass. Drop a comment below and tell me which one of these bottles you own right now, because I guarantee at least one of you is pouring from a bottle on this list tonight. The next entry is one where the borrowed reputation is doing more work than the whiskey. Weller 12-year, 90 proof. Around $90, the manufacturer's suggested retail price when you can find it. On the secondary market, it sells for $200 to $300, and sometimes higher. At that price, Weller 12-year is a fine bourbon, genuinely enjoyable. Worth the $90 suggested price on a good day. What it is not worth is the secondary market premium, and that premium exists for exactly one reason. The Weller line uses the same wheated Buffalo Trace mash bill that is associated with the Van Winkle family of bourbons. The Pappy Van Winkle halo effect reaches down the shelf and inflates every wheated bourbon that has any Buffalo Trace connection, whether the liquid justifies it or not. You are not paying for what is in the bottle. You are paying for what is not in the bottle, but shares a family resemblance with it. That is like paying concert ticket prices to watch the opening act because they once shared a stage with someone famous. The Weller 12-year is the opening act. It is enjoyable. It does not charge opening act prices. Green River Wheated Bourbon, around $35 to $40 on most shelves. Available online, consistently stocked. No hype, no Pappy adjacency, no storied Buffalo Trace connection to drive the price into secondary market territory. And in 2025, it won World Best Bourbon at the New York World Spirits Competition. Not a category ribbon. The top bourbon honor at one of the most credible competitions in the industry. The judges were blind. The bottle was anonymous. The liquid won on merit. The nose is soft and inviting. A little honeysuckle, warm baking bread, gentle vanilla. On the palate, it opens with the classic wheated sweetness, but there is actual backbone underneath. A subtle nuttiness and dried apricot note that keeps it from collapsing into simple sweetness. The finish is clean, longer than the price suggests it has any right to be, with a warmth that stays without burning. At $35, this is not a value pick in the sense of settling. This is better than what it costs. Put the $200 secondary Weller 12-year down. Pick this up instead. Save $160. And now we arrive at the entry that made me want to make this video in the first place. Heaven Hill Heritage Collection, 18-year Kentucky Straight Bourbon, 120 proof. Priced at $299 manufacturer's suggested retail price. The bottle implies legacy, age, and the kind of quality that justifies $300 in any serious bourbon conversation. Heaven Hill is a family-owned company with a genuine and impressive production history. The 18-year age statement is real. The liquid has spent 18 years in a warehouse. None of that is in question. What is in question is whether the result in the glass matches the $300 ask, and the answer, based on consistent feedback from serious reviewers and enthusiasts across multiple release years, is that it does not. The Heritage Collection has been uneven year to year. The 18-year release, despite the age and the price, delivers a profile that many tasters describe as solidly good rather than exceptional. Dried fruit, some leather, decent oak integration. A whiskey that would be genuinely impressive at $125 to $150. At $300, it is a letdown by the math of its own pricing. Here is the part that should genuinely frustrate you. Heaven Hill makes Elijah Craig barrel proof, the same mash bill. Bottled at full barrel proof, typically around 120 proof or higher depending on the batch. Since 2023, each batch carries its own unique age statement rather than a fixed 12-year floor, meaning the liquid inside is documented and honest about what it is. The manufacturer's suggested retail price, or MSRP, sits around $75. In blind tasting after blind tasting, documented across enthusiast forums, independent review publications, and whiskey competition results, Elijah Craig Barrel Proof has matched or outperformed expressions that cost 3 and 4 times as much. The C923 batch, to name one specific release that generated enormous attention, was widely considered among the best American whiskeys of its release year, at $75. And remember what I said about the same production family earlier with Booker's and Knob Creek? This is that pattern again. But the gap is even wider. $300 versus $75. Same distillery. The Heritage Collection is asking you to pay 4 times more for an older age statement on a liquid that, in most blind comparisons, does not deliver 4 times the experience. This is the most egregious value gap on this list. Not because Heaven Hill is a bad company, because the pricing strategy on the Heritage Collection treats the age statement as the product and assumes you will not notice that the same distillery is putting out better value in a different labeled bottle at a quarter of the cost. Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, $75. Find it, buy it, and pour it next to anything priced at $300 and run the test yourself. And now the value pick that earns its place based not on personal preference, but on objective validation. We have covered the Knob Creek 12-year, the Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, and Green River Weeded. Now let us close with the one that ties the whole production family thread together. Russell's Reserve Single Barrel, 110 proof, sells for around $60 to $70 at most retailers. It is a single barrel wild turkey bourbon, selected by the Austin Nichols team, and aged until the distillery decides it is ready, rather than held to a minimum age before shipping. Remember the Russell Reserve Single Rick House sitting at $300? Same distillery. The Rick House release markets the specific warehouse provenance as a reason to pay $300. The single barrel release gives you 1 barrel selected for quality, with 110 proof intensity at $60 to $70. The proof gap between the two is real, and the Rick House release is legitimately exceptional bourbon. But is that gap worth $230? Based on the number of store-picked single-barrel releases that have matched it blind, the answer is no. Find a retailer that takes their single-barrel picks seriously. Ask them which Russell's Reserve single barrel they have on the floor and what made them select that specific barrel. 5 out of 10 retailers who care about their selection will point you to something that will fundamentally change your expectations for what $65 buys in bourbon. The bourbon industry is brilliant at selling you the story of the bottle instead of the contents. Fancy stoppers, annual release theater, age statements used as price anchors rather than quality indicators. Warehouse names turned into $300 marketing lines. The next time you reach for a shelf, ask one question before the price tag asks it for you. What is in the glass? Not what is on the label. Not what the stopper looks like. Not which famous lineup it shares a mash bill with. The glass. That is the only honest answer the bottle will ever give you.